Hey guys, it's Matt. Welcome back to Beard of Darkness Book Reviews. Today I'm going to pay a little bit of homage to one of my favorite authors. He just had his brand new thriller, suspense, action book released. It's called Tides of Fire, and it's James Rollins is the author I'm speaking of. He is one of the first authors I began reading after finding my newly rekindled love for reading, and he's had a huge impact on me. Here's some right behind me I won't get too much into these ones today. These are his first fantasy releases, because he did have another pen name, James Clemens. Check both of those out. His pen name, James Clemens, and his other pen name, James Rollins. So James Rollins is one that he basically only writes thrillers, suspense anymore. They're usually very technology based. Tides of Fire, that dropped August 15th, 2023, just the other day, is very much the same. It's a lot of technology, a lot of science, and he does this very well because he incorporates both of those together to create a very action-packed, suspenseful, interesting story. No matter what he writes, whether it's what he started with as James Clemens, fantasy, he does it very well. He has his own original prose. He does this just as well as most fantasy authors, and just because he only does suspense and action, technology, writing anymore, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go back and check out his earlier work. It's very impressive. And if you have kids, he also did a YA fantasy, Jake Ransom. This one in particular is Skull King Shadow. Also a couple of standalone books. What he writes currently is part of the Sigma Force novels, and there's 17 of them now, including Tides of Fire. But when he first started his switch to James Rollins' pen name, he did two standalones. The first one is Altar of Eden, and the second one is Ice Hunt. Now, I believe Ice Hunt came out first. He also did one called Amazonia. This is the Amazonia copy I have. I'd like to find it in hardback. It's not hard to find, but it's definitely not an easy find, I guess. You can buy it on Amazon. It's a little higher than I think that I would like to pay for an older hardback, but you can find it. Amazonia. Back to the Sigma Force, which is Sigma Force novels, which is basically why I'm doing this video, because he just had his latest drop, Tides of Fire. I'm just going to go through a couple of my favorites personally. I haven't read them all, but I've read most of them. I would like to point out also, yes, there's 17 of Sigma Force novels in this series, but you don't have to read from book one. He does a great job of incorporating the same characters, most of the same characters, but each book is kind of its own story. Yes, of course, there's some Easter eggs. You benefit from reading from book one to current, but you absolutely don't have to, which makes it really nice too, because I haven't necessarily read the books in order 100%. I may skip one or two, but now that I've gotten more advanced in reading James Rollins, I do find it beneficial to keep in order. I'm kind of OCD about that kind of thing. I like to read in order no matter what it is, whether it's a prequel to a novella between books 2 and 3. One of my favorite Sigma Force series books is The Doomsday Key. This one, basically a scientist, a senator's son, and a Vatican archaeologist. They all end up dead. They all end up being related at the end. They all have the pagan cross burned onto them. So you find out from the beginning that they're all related in some way. You find out eventually in the book there's a really cool, the Doomsday Key. It's not an actual key, but read the book and you'll understand. It's full of religious conspiracy, the Catholic Church, a lot of that stuff. So if you're into like the Da Vinci Code, any of the Dan Brown books, you can bet that you'd like James Rollins. They're not the same at all. They're very different. They're very original to their own prose. The next Sigma Force series novel that is one of my favorites is The Crucible. You find out about some ancient sects, not sects, but sects, cryptic meanings. You've got apocalyptic world being at risk. You have technology. You've got ancient scrolls that come into play. It's just really fun to read. It's action-packed, and I'm not going to get too much more into the details of these books, because really it's hard to not spoil a book that has a lot of detail in it like that. For instance, if you read one of his novels, you need to know each one of those details, and as you find them out, they make more sense and more sense throughout the novel. So, I wanted to give a couple of my favorites. I started with, I believe it was Ice Hunt, and since then it's just been, I'm absolutely going to read everything that he has to offer. And he works really hard. He puts a book out every couple years. He wears different hats, meaning he does fantasy and action, thriller, technology, all that. And this next series I'm about to talk about is actually a horror thriller, so he even throws some horror in there. Now, James Rollins and Rebecca Cantrell come together on this, it's called the Order of the Sanguine series. The first one is The Blood Gospel. The second one is Innocent Blood. And the third part of the trilogy is Blood Infernal. And these are great. Lots of religious conspiracy, apocalyptic prophecies. It's really, really good. If you guys like the Catholic Church, kind of maybe like a dark side of it, with the conspiracies that you hear of all the time in these kind of books. Basically, these guys are part of an order in the Catholic Church where they would kill and drink blood in their old life, and they have committed themselves to the church, the Catholic Church, and they resist these urges and do good. A little bit of violence, nothing too off the wall. There's nothing grim about it, but when it mixes the religious aspect of it, it becomes even more interesting, especially with the Catholic Church and emblems and symbols and artifacts. I'm going to finish the video up with my favorite duology. It's a fantasy duology, and he actually wrote this as James Rollins. So, again, his first pen name was James Clemens. He did only fantasy. He switched to James Rollins, does action suspense, and also has incorporated that same pen name, James Rollins, with this new fantasy series. It's a duology. The first one, The Starless Crown, great, great, great book. It follows a girl named Nyx. She's blind. There's certain reasons for that. You find out in the book. But James Rollins, in real life, he was a vet. He's a veterinarian. And he incorporates his love of animals, and his epigraphs are that of these fake animals or creatures that he's created, and pictures of them and diagrams and their anatomy and how he's labeled it. It's really fun. And the second part to the Moonfall Saga is the name of this duology, is The Cradle of Ice. Follows the same girl, Nyx, as she goes on this adventure to save the world. There's really cool aircrafts that they remind me of Zeppelins. They're like balloon type crafts that are fueled, and that's how they travel. They go to different lands, and it's a really adventurous coming of age trope. So all in all, absolutely recommend James Rollins as a author. He's a really interesting guy in real life too. He's a veterinarian, as I said. So whether you're into fantasy, if you want to switch over to a little bit of the horror side with some action adventure, or if you just strictly want some action suspense, he can take care of you. Until next time, guys, stay creative, stay imaginative.